From an electrifying battle at UFC 284 to the idea of an immediate rematch, Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski had it all. It was a tremendous matchup, with both gentlemen putting on a banger of a show.
And then getting out of these tough positions. I mean, Makhachev's
the beginning of the takedown, gets the rear body lock. Now let's take a look. Right hand. Here we see, some back and forth next
here. That's the second time Volkanovski's gotten away.
But believe it or not, the UFC president has different plans. Uncle Dana hasn't exactly shunned the idea of a rematch between the two champions, but at the same time, he isn't convinced it needs to happen straight away either. And honestly speaking, I find that very strange. I'll tell you why. When Kamaru Usman lost his title to Leon Edwards after a devastating last round, White had only one thing on his mind: an immediate rematch. It happened after Alex Pereira versus Israel Adesanya too. The Brazilian defeated Izzy to win the middleweight title, extending his win streak over the Nigerian to 4-0. But what did the last stylebender get? You guessed it, an immediate rematch. So why Dana White doesn't want to see these guys fight again is beyond my understanding. He did say it had something to do with Yair Rodriguez becoming the interim featherweight champion, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But first, I quickly want to talk about what the UFC president thought of the fight. While most fans and MMA personalities continue to call it a controversial decision, Dana can't get enough.
You know what my thoughts are on that? When you make a super fight, could you possibly have a better fucking result than we did on that fight, right? When the entire world is arguing over who won, that's a super fight, and it delivers.
He said this is exactly what makes a champ versus champ fight so exciting. It's so close that no one has any idea who won. And you'd sort of reckon he probably wants to cash in on all the hype, but nope. He's open to it, but not immediately. Even UFC legend Daniel Cormier thinks the two superstars shouldn't fight again so soon, since they need to take care of their respective divisions. Oh, before I tell you what DC means by that, we probably won't see Islam fight anytime soon. He's going to be observing Ramadan pretty soon, so it's break time for the champion. And as for Volk, Cormier thinks he needs to come back to reality and remember he has a division to tend to. And I know what you're thinking right now. Didn't the Aussie say he'd continue to bounce between both weight classes if he won the title? Well, he didn't.
Saying that he was going back to his corner saying he wants a rematch because he thought he lost.
Should we do it again? Feel good. Maybe Abu Dhabi.
I would jump on that.
And since he's not the lightweight champion, it's best if he dropped to his original weight class and focused on Yair Rodriguez. If anything, I think it'd be super unfair to Yair if Alexander continued to dodge him in the hopes to get another shot at the lightweight champion.
Now we got a guy, right? There's a guy deserves that shot, and it's clear. And that's what I wanted, but we'll see what's happening.
And from the looks of it, he's trying really hard these days to force a rematch. How do I know this? Well, whenever someone asks him about Rodriguez, that's all he says. He starts going into detail about what the interim title is for and how he's free to pursue a rematch if he wants. And he's right. The featherweight champ can continue his lightweight endeavors, but just a quick correction here, that's not what the interim belt is for. It only makes sense when the champ is injured or busy, and right now, Alexander seems to have nothing going on. But maybe the whole reason why he's so adamant about a rematch is because the momentum is on his side. I mean, just think about it.
Here's a wild exchange, nice rips.
Makhachev using more energy, that right hand down here, and then you see Volkanovski, big left hand, and finishes this fight in top position.
Islam might have had more control time, but it was Volka who did more damage. And while the entire fight world continued to talk about how the Dagestani would run through Alexander with his elite wrestling, the Aussie was actually shouting at his corner, telling them how Makhachev isn't even that strong. And yeah, I'm not saying it's a robbery or something, since it was too close to tell. The fight could have gone either way, but if there's anyone who shocked the fight world that night, it has to be Alexander Volkanovski. Everything was against him that night, and I'm not sure if you remember or not, but the size difference didn't make a difference either. I say that because the majority of fighters thought Islam would be too big for him. All in all, it was a solid performance from the featherweight champ, and if I'm being honest, I think he'd be the more confident fighter going into the rematch, if it ever happens. But then again, despite setting up two separate high-profile rematches this year, why is Dana so opposed to Alexander Volkanovski versus Islam Makhachev too?
We'll see what happens with Islam and where he ends up fighting next. You have to do Yair. You have to do that fight. I mean, the guy came out and absolutely dominated a stud that night. And then you have the rematch.
I know I just talked about this, but I'm having such a hard time figuring out why this isn't in the books yet. Like, is Dana worried Volka could end Islam's hype? Or does the president have some other things in mind? Maybe he wants Makhachev to remain champion until the end of 2023 so he could set up a fight with the Irishman on the cards. Just think about it. Islam Makhachev versus Conor McGregor. That'd be huge. And I don't want you to look at it from a competitive point of view. Think about the money. Because after all, Uncle Dana is a businessman, right? And whatever he does is to make sure the promotion continues making a profit. So yeah, I definitely think there's more to this than what meets the eye, because it's sort of a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you make these guys fight again? I mean, imagine a showdown in Abu Dhabi. It would be massive. Plus, that's also what both of these guys agreed on. Shortly after their clash at UFC 284, Alexander was standing next to Islam and his team getting a picture clicked when he pitched the idea of a rematch.
Should we do it again? Should we good? Maybe Abu Dhabi. Yes. We deserve it one in Abu Dhabi. My turn to get booed.
Makhachev was immediately on board, and his trainer blurted out how it needed to happen in Abu Dhabi. And I don't know if you know this or not, but Abu Dhabi is pretty much home turf for the Dagestani boys. It would be a huge event in terms of attendance and revenue. But enough about how Volka should tend his division. Makhachev has a responsibility as well. I'm pretty sure everyone has heard the news by now. Charles Oliveira will be fighting Beneil Dariush in what's going to be an epic battle for a shot at the lightweight title. And while I know both of them won't be thinking about all that right now, everyone knows that the fight is for the lightweight title. If the Brazilian ends up winning, it'll be UFC 278 all over again, as we see Islam fight him for the second time around. But if it's Beneil, I think that could spell a lot of trouble for the Dagestani, because while everyone continues to talk about how Islam is the most dominant fighter in the lightweight division, Dariush is casually pointing out flaws in his game.
Interesting to see who has the advantage. Oh, big left hand. That's it. Wow.
Islam Makhachev.
Out of nowhere, I was about to say.
He's so unconvinced by the lightweight champ and thinks he could take him on any day. Also, if you ask me, I think it would be very unfair to make the American-Assyrian fight wait at this point. He's on an unbelievable winning streak, and I think he's the most deserving fighter out there. So, how are things going to play out in the coming months? Well, I think Uncle Dana will have both Islam and Volka fight in their native divisions, and if they're able to defend their titles, then sure, a rematch will be in the books. But who knows what happens? Maybe an opponent will come along and dethrone one of them. So, at this point, it's really hard to tell how things are going to play out in the coming months. But if one thing is for sure, it's going to be very interesting watching things evolve in 2023. Anyway.
Personal stuff, whatever it might be. But yeah, to me, the fight that makes sense is you make Yair versus Volkanovski, Islam versus somebody whenever that happens, and then you do the rematch.
That's what Dana White has in store for a possible Alexander Volkanovski versus Islam Makhachev rematch.